first of all, the name Donna Loren.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be a household name to a lot of people, but like I say, they've seen you in a lot of stuff. I mean, you've been in the Beach Party movies.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in the Monkees, Dr. Kildare, and my favorite, Batman.
All right.
He was the man back then, and that was the show to be on there whenever he was on the air too.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And you were the Dr. Pepper girl for several years too during the 60s.
Yes, I was.
Well, when I say Donna Loren, some listeners out there might think, oh, as in Sophia Loren, but you didn't start out as Donna Loren, though.
No, that changed around when I was 14, and I had a record producer back in the days when people didn't use their real names. They wanted to look for something a little bit more Hollywood, and my birth name, the last one, was Zucker, and I did do my first record as Donna Zucker when I was 9 years old, and I was even on the Mickey Mouse Club as Donna Zucker. But when a fellow named Jimmy Bowen, who's from Texas, decided to produce me and do a little record called Hands Off, that he said, we just have to go with another name. And he was the one that came up with Loren, and it stuck.
Okay, so it's Loren, not Loren.
Either way, it's whatever makes you tick.
Okay. Well, now, Zucker is a Hollywood name.
This is very true, and actually my adopted dad used Zucker as a pen name because he was in the animation business and worked in all the studios and was familiar with Adolf Zucker at Paramount and, adopted his name. But he came from Europe, and as many immigrants coming through Ellis Island, their names were not easily pronounceable, and the officers that were, dealing with immigration just, tried to phonetically sound out people's names that sounded strange. And anyway, so my dad became known as Zucker.
Well, along your years in the business, you've worked with a lot of big stars from TV, movies, music too. I mean, just...
Yeah, it's really been a trip. We just lost Annette, but I had the privilege of seeing Frankie after many years at a show that I was doing, and he pretty much looks the same. It's amazing. He's got a lot of energy. And, there's just been, Adam West and Burt Ward also, have been part of my life recently. And Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees and Peter Tork. And, I do various celebrity events, and they're all showing up. So I'm getting a chance to reacquaint with people from my past.
Yeah. Now, you did a Monkees thing here not too long ago, didn't you?
I did one in March. There was a Monkees convention in New Jersey just after Davey passed. And his daughters were there representing him, and Mike Nesbitt's son was there representing him. And Mickey and Peter showed up and performed and pleased a lot of fans,
yeah.
to say the least.
Well, now, as far as your performing goes, you got started pretty young. How did you get started out?
Yeah, well, like a lot of kids in small towns, because I was from a little town called Mar Vista in Southern California, and my mother saw a sign about a amateur contest at a market of all things, and so she signed me up. And it took a lot of coaxing because I was pretty shy, but she convinced me that my neighbor, who I called Uncle Don, who had a Model T Ford, would drive me there in his rumble seat. So I was 5 years old, and I entered the contest, and I sang, "How much is that doggy in the window?" and came in second to a little girl who was a baton twirler. They always get first place anyway, as long as they don't drop their baton. And that was the beginning.
one of your early appearances, we'll just kind of move on, was on a radio commercial along with the voice of Speedy Alka-Seltzer.
It's true. Tim, I was about 8 years old, and I was standing next to a full-grown man who was eye to eye to me. He was like a munchkin. And it was really weird I'd seen him, I heard his voice on the commercials. I didn't know that it came from a man who was probably in his 50s at the time. And he looked like, he was wearing a suit from the children's department. So, but he was a very sweet guy. And I sang my part in the Metagold ice cream commercial, which I think Metagold ice cream is still around, or Metagold dairy products is still around. And then he had the speaking part in this radio commercial.
Was that before he did the Speedy Alka-Seltzer, or was that?
No, this is after.
Afterwards? Okay. Couldn't remember my timeline then. It seems like that Speedy has been in the Alka-Seltzer commercials on and off forever. So. Well,
when you want to get rid of a stomach ache or a headache, you want it to be speedy. So, they kept their important word.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. You mentioned the Mickey Mouse Club. You were a guest. You weren't one of the Mouseketeers, right?
No, I was asked to be a Mouseketeer, and again, going back to my dad, who was an animator at Disney at the time, which had no influence over my being chosen to even audition for the Mickey Mouse Club. But he decided at the audition that basically I'll set it up for you, because back in the day there were these big sound stages at Disney Studios. And there was a very long table with lots of adults sitting behind, judging the talent that were auditioning. And so I did my thing. My dad actually was animating at Disney at the time and asked to take a break when it was my time to audition. And my mother transported me there. So it was this. Do you get the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. So I go on and I do my couple numbers, and I get the sign from somebody sitting at the table to come over. So my dad and I went over to the table, and they said, "We want you to be a Mouseketeer." And I looked at my dad like, "Whoa, this is huge," because I love the Mickey Mouse Club. Uh-huh. And plus, something that I'm writing about in my autobiography is that, my parents came from a middle-class, hardworking family, like so many, and they thought that maybe I would be the one to bring in the do-re-mi, Yeah. And so basically, by the time I was 7 years old, that was the idea, is that my career would become the family's income. And so I was really shocked, even though I was just turning 10 years old. I was really shocked that my dad said to this panel of adults, "No, she's a solo." He wouldn't let me sign with the group.
Wow.
And so then they said, "Okay, well then let's just bring her on as a guest on the Talent Roundup," and so that's what happened.
Okay, all right. I thought you probably were on the Talent Roundup show. So
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, moving right along, some of another big name that you shared the stage with, Jonathan Winters, another one that we lost recently.
That's true. Oh, my gosh. Well, he and I presented an award at the Grammys to Henry Mancini, who won for the Pink Panther that year. And Jonathan Winters, well, he just couldn't help himself. That man is so brilliant that I was just happy he didn't pick on me. Like Don Rickles, when Don Rickles was in the Beach Party movies, he couldn't help himself either. It's like, certain comedians, I would say the great comedians, they're on all the time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, that's just who they are.
Yeah.
And, like Robin Williams, their minds just go a mile a second. And anyway, so on the Grammys, just before I went on, one of the assistant directors comes over and gives me the list of names I'm going to read, and she asked me, do you have any questions? And I thought I saw everything, like I could read, and so I said, no, everything's fine. So it was time to make the announcements, and it was one of the categories I read off was the best female artist, and one of the names was Miriam Makeba, who I wasn't familiar with, and from reading the Bible, I thought it was pronounced Maccabee. So I pronounced her name Miriam Maccabee, and Jonathan Winters stops me and says, "Did you eat your Wheaties today?" and everybody laughed, and fortunately, saved my embarrassment. So then we moved on to the best composers category.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know that I've heard of her either. So
she's a great African female legendary singer, almost like Bob Dylan is here. She's that way. Actually, a patriot and a freedom fighter. But no, when I was a teenager, I just wasn't aware of that. I was more aware of what was going on here with Martin Luther King and President Kennedy and the scene that was going on over here.
Right.
So I did the best I could. But looking back, I should have asked questions. I should have reviewed it with the assistant when she asked me. It's like, no, when you're 18 years old and you're given that responsibility, sometimes you just go with it.
Well, when you're 55 years old and in radio, you still do it sometimes. So
okay. I don't feel so bad now, Jim. Thanks. That's reassuring.
Oh, well, all right. Another person you worked with early on, James Burton, the master of the Telecaster.
Oh, yeah, James. Well, James, I met when I was about 8 years old on a radio show in Southern California called Squeakin' Deacon. It was a country radio show live, and after, I guess he was just starting to work with Ricky Nelson at the time. And then later on, we met up at Shindig when I was, 9 years later when I was 17, and then we worked there for about a year and a half. And then actually in the 80s, I hooked up with he and his son, Jeff, and James helped me put an album together. Actually, didn't know it was going to be an album then, but we went in the studio many times because I've always loved to sing, and even though I retired at an early age, I still kept singing just for my own soul,
Yeah.
And I was going through a divorce at that time, so it was very therapeutic for me to have a friend like James to help me go in the studio and put a band together, and record.
Yeah.
So anyway, and that ultimately, after many years, that stuff stayed in a box for about 30 years, and until my current husband, my second husband, Jared, whom I've known since high school, actually, dug it out of a box, dusted it off, and took all those songs and turned it into an album called Magic. So I've got something to show for it,
Yeah. Speaking of Jared, he was. I read where he was your prom date.
He sure was.
Okay, and a member of the group, the Fantastic Baggies.
Yes. Well, his best friend in the world is a fellow named P.F. Sloan.
Yep.
And he and his friend Phil went to junior high together, and they were neighbors. And there's always been a major music fan and used to hang out at the studios with Phil when Phil was starting out. And they got this idea of doing a surf band because Phil was very involved with Jan and Dean and actually sang the high part, "Ooh, lady from Pasadena."
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you don't hear those stories, because you think that it's Dean Torrance singing that high part.
Well, I always did, yeah.
He's actually still in the studio, working with these people, and he did the high voice. But in the Fantastic Baggies, Jared played the role of the baritone, and so those harmonies that you hear, the low parts, are him.
Okay. Well, I play their stuff on my radio show, by the way, so you can tell him he's at least getting airplay in Athens, Alabama.
I'll tell him he's hanging 10 in Athens.
Yeah. And I also do a weekend surfing music show, too, called Surfside 60s. And so he's in there, you're in there, and so everything I can think of to throw in there that's surfing type stuff, All right, well, let's see. That was kind of a detour there. We were talking about James Burton. Now, you mentioned Ricky Nelson. He worked with him. Elvis, Johnny Cash, Glenn Campbell. He was connected up with a lot of guys.
Oh yeah, well he was big time with Elvis. I think that's probably one of the highlights of his life. Because after Elvis left us, he put the band together, all the musicians that he created for Elvis back in the 60s. And they took the show on the road and had films of Elvis performing with them in the background when they were all young. And then they're up front, on the stage live now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw where they were doing that a few years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But I think James has settled back down in Baton Rouge in Louisiana and has a guitar festival every year, but I'm sure people, borrow his Suzy Q line and all kinds of stuff that he's done through the years.
Yeah. Well, back to Donna Loren, or Loren, whichever way you want to go with it. We mentioned your stint with Dr. Pepper. Now, they sponsored a TV special that you got to co-host with Dick Clark, another guy who never looked like he aged.
Yeah. No kidding. My God, he was just outrageous and just absolutely adored music. And but anyway, yeah, I had a chance to meet him the first time right after I got signed to a very long-term contract with Dr. Pepper to be their spokesperson. And, right after I did my first set of commercials, and, TV, radio, print, all that kind of stuff, billboards, that kind of stuff, the next thing I know is, I'm being introduced to Dick Clark at the scene when we're going to go live on air in Hollywood with a house full of celebrities. He's got a microphone for himself. I'm given a microphone for myself. And at 16 years of age, I'm co-hosting a live network television show with Dick Clark.
Man.
Sponsored by Dr. Pepper, of course.
Yeah. And you talked about a house full of stars. Frankie and Annette, Dick Dale, Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, Nancy Sinatra. It's hard to imagine that they fit them all in an hour. Was it an hour show?
Yes, it was an hour. Well, this fellow named Bob Marcucci, who used to manage Frankie and Fabian and others, had a house up from the Sunset Strip, and it was kind of a hub. So, I think the people that were there, had been there before, and certainly they loved Frankie and they knew Bob Marcucci, so it wasn't hard to get them all assembled. Plus, those were the days when Playboy had a live, I believe it was live, or maybe it was taped, I don't know, but it appeared to be live party on air, and so this is just one of those special occasions. I don't even think that they did it again. It was maybe one of a kind.
Did they all perform, or just some of them make an appearance, or?
Yeah, I think Annette sang, and I did. I know that. Dick and Dee Dee were there, so they sang a song. Trini Lopez, I think.
Wow.
Got the guitar and sang something. Wayne Newton was there. I don't know. I can't remember anybody else. I'd have to check it out again.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you were just pretty much run ragged.
Well, I was only 16 years old, so.
You had the energy back then, too, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that was my complete focus, if you can imagine. I didn't really, I had to drop out of school, when I signed my contract with Dr. Pepper, and sign up with a professional school for working minors, and but I really barely ever attended because I was constantly on the road. And it was a unique and very special experience, and it really gave me a chance to see America and, to meet so many people from all over, from coast to coast.
Well, it seemed like you were paired up with Dick Clark for several things there for a stretch. I mean, you were on his Caravan of Stars.
Yes, well, he the American Bandstand was on the road, man. He had, the one that I was on was the first tour the Supremes ever did. And, so we heard Baby Love and Where Did Our Love Go for the first time on stage. And we all shared a bus, and Dick Clark was on the same bus. Huh. So, he's really, he was so into it and so supportive. We had some other groups that, we had like the Shirelles, Will You Love Me Tomorrow was one of their big hits.
Right.
And we had the Crystals. We had, we had Gene Pitney, Town Without Pity.
Oh, yeah.
Who was number 1 in 5 countries at that time. And I don't know, there was a pretty good, and there was a group called the Ripcords.
Oh, yeah.
that sang Hey Little Cobra.
Yeah.
And just coincidentally, this weekend, I was invited by them after all these years to a special car show where they invited me to sing a couple of my songs from the Beach Party movies.
All right. Well, the Ripcords are still up and ripping then, I guess.
I guess so. Well, the Ripcords, they used to be 3 guys. And one of them is not part of the original group, but 2 of the original members, just decided to perpetuate what they started years ago. And now they've got like 12 people in their act, 3 background singers and a full band.
Wow.
And they do Vegas, and they travel around the country. So it's pretty special. I mean, I barely have to rehearse with them because one of their background singers I hear sings similar to me, and so she's been rehearsing with the band It Only Hurts When I Cry and Muscle Bustle. So I pretty much only have to walk in and just do it,
And it's not like you haven't done that before.
That's true. Oh, yeah, that is true. I had a blast, oh, gosh, a couple months ago. There's a fellow named Deke Dickerson who loves that genre of music, and he plays guitar like nobody's business. He is really a modern James Burton. He can play all that stuff so authentically. It's really crazy, and he knows my music almost better than I do. So there's a club here called the Echo, and in Los Angeles, where he was performing, and so I got invited to do a couple numbers there, and it was really, really great. It's so fun seeing how the music has, just captured the imagination of the hearts of more generations. I never, ever, ever believed that back when I was doing it, that we would be talking about this now.
Yeah. Back to this Caravan of Stars thing, that movie, That Thing You Do, with Tom Hanks, it had the one hit, The Wonders, in there, and
sure,
they go on the traveling tour, and they're in the Beach Party movie. Was that movie pretty close to kind of the way things were?
Oh yeah, I mean, Tom Hanks is an aficionado of that period of music, and he wouldn't do anything that isn't authentic. So yeah, he really captured. Let's say in a in a parody form. He took a bunch of different ideas and then blended them and created, a reenactment of that genre. So specifically, I can't say yes, it was totally cool because I'd have to watch it again. but from my memory, I think he really did a great job and told the story of the music of that period.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies. Now, speaking of movies, we'll move on to some of your movie roles. Early movies, you were, I don't know, seemed to me kind of there to provide the musical moments, especially those beach movies, but it seemed like with each movie, you got a little bit more screen time.
Yeah.
As it went on, too.
The way it all started, I didn't really know this at the time, but when I was signed to Dr. Pepper, there was an ad agency. Are you familiar with Mad Men?
Oh, yeah. That's one of my favorite shows, too.
Okay, well, you know the role of Don Draper and the whole ad agency thing.
Yeah.
Well, there was an ad agency like that for Dr. Pepper. You know, I mean, this is the real deal. And one of the execs, like a Don Draper guy, had a big plan to expand the market for Dr. Pepper. And that's why I was hired to be, a representative of the teens and, expanding into that market because Dr. Pepper hadn't tried that before. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't know is that this Don Draper guy was also a writer and a producer. He co-wrote the screenplay of Muscle Beach Party, and he was also the co-producer. And so what I became was product placement for Dr. Pepper, who was the sponsor of the film.
Oh, okay.
And so when I showed up on set, really all I was going to do was sit there holding a Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
And then the musical director of the movie heard my radio commercials and heard that I could sing. And so he just introduced me to Dick Dale, and he said, okay, you guys are going to do a duet. So before we knew it, that's what we were doing. And that's how I was introduced to the Beach Party movies, and it just grew from there. And
your signature song comes out of one of them, from Beach Blanket Bingo, It Only Hurts When I Cry.
Yeah, I haven't sung that song for so many years, and then around 2010, I think, I went back in the studio and tried it out in a whole other way, and I just fell back in love with it. In fact, even more. And every time I sing it now, it just gets deeper and deeper meaning for me.
Yeah.
It only hurts when I cry. is really kind of a good attitude song because, if you just don't bring yourself down to that point, you know what I mean? You can be resilient in your life.
Yeah.
And bounce back like a beach ball.
Yeah. I haven't heard the updated version. Is it much different from the original version as far as arrangements go, or?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I did a very romantic version of it. So, as a matter of fact, the day that I did the video was the same day I was in downtown LA filming the video, and just a couple blocks away is where Michael Jackson was being memorialized. I'll never forget that. It was the same time this year, but about 3 years ago. And, I went in the studio with a guitar player, and we just did a very romantic version of it.
So when you perform it, do you do that version, or do you do the old version?
I pick up the tempo and kind of combine the two.
Okay. All right. Because I remember I saw Olivia Newton-John here a few years ago, and she does her version of Physical now is totally different than what was on the radio. And it's, really? I don't know, it's more sultry sounding now than it was then, so.
I guess as we mature, our material has to mature with us.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, tell that to Mike Love of the Beach Boys, though.
Really? He still sounds the same. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Now, the album from that Beach Blanket Bingo, I heard that was your first LP, and I read where you did the whole album in one long session. You're correct.
I certainly did. I went in, didn't leave for 14 hours. It was one of those things where my record producer said, the movie is going to be a hit. Let's get you in the studio now. And so H.C. Barnum was my arranger, and he just went to town on, oh gosh, how many songs? I don't know, 12 or 14 songs. And we just started, live at Capitol with the Wrecking Crew. There's like a group of musicians, the A musicians, and like Glenn Campbell and people like that. And we just stayed down in the studio, down in the tower of Capitol, and until we were done at probably 2:00 in the morning.
Wow.
There was a sign in the sound booth where the mixing board is. A sign on the wall. No minors, according to the union, are allowed to work more than 4 hours. Yeah, I think I was 17 at the time, and I had to barrel through 14 hours straight.
Okay, so did they take a break every 4 hours? So
Right. I don't think so. I mean, there was a room full of A-list musicians, and...
All right. Well, you mentioned the TV show Shindig. Now, you were on there, I guess, pretty much to sing the hits of the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, just for instance, like, the first show that I was on was the first show of the season, and the producer of the show was English, and he loved American music. He loved English music, but mostly, wanted to get the performers who did the songs originally.
Right.
He couldn't get Dusty Springfield to do "Wishin' and Hopin' on the first show. So when I auditioned for Shindig, he thought I could do it justice, and so he gave me a chance to do that.
Okay. I was going to mention that they did actually have the original artists on there, but then I guess you filled in between with whatever.
Well, what happened for Shindig is that there was a cast. Bobby Sherman, myself, Glenn Campbell, James Burton, Leon Russell. There were a bunch of us that became the cast of Shindig, and then the guests would come on, like the Stones or all kinds of people, Jerry Lee Lewis or whomever, come on and perform.
Okay, I remember the show. I just didn't remember the format. So.
Yeah, and then, of course, it was the very first show that had all the go-go dancers on the top of the bleachers with the shadows, and basically the Blossoms, with Darlene Love singing background. I mean, it was just a classic show. Well,
you do a short-lived show with Bobby Rydell, Milton Berle show.
Yes. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, too.
And then some of the other appearances, of course, we mentioned Dr. Kildare, Batman, where you were part of the Joker's gang. What was Cesar Romero like?
Well, first of all, complete and utter gentleman. And, when I met him, he was in full costume and makeup. So, I mean, it was kind of a reaction for me to hear him laugh like the Joker laughed. When I got to know him a little bit better, it was the scene when we were in the truck, and Batman and Robin are all tied up in the back of the truck. And we were stopping the scene to take a new take, and he had this little lunchbox next to him in the middle of the seat, and he opened it, and in there was like a little oxygen tank. So he took a big hit of that, oxygen, because it turned out that he had emphysema, which means that that Joker laugh, is probably because he had a hard time breathing, but, he gave it his all.
I never knew that. Oh, another backstage story there.
Yeah.
I read where your kiss with Robin on that episode got a lot of mail.
I don't get it. It was such a harmless publicity thing that I think it was in TV Guide that wanted to just publicize Batman, and it was already a huge hit. Even though I was on one of the first shows, I think it was the fourth or fifth show, and it was just, Robin in full costume, me in my cheerleader outfit, and giving him a little kiss. I just don't know what the big to-do is all about.
Well, seemed like a lot of stuff caused uproar then that, wouldn't even raise an eyebrow now, but...
Not at all.
Anyway.
Not at all. We've made some progress.
All right. Well, we mentioned the Monkees. Gomer Pyle USMC was another one. You appeared on the Danny Thomas Hour, and that was intended as a pilot for your own series. What came out of that?
Yeah. Well, I met this writer named Arnold Schulman who wrote a movie called Love with the Proper Stranger, and that starred Natalie Wood and Steve McQueen. And it was about a girl in New York with two very overprotective brothers in kind of an ethnic neighborhood, and they wouldn't let her out of their sight. So that was the premise of the movie, and then Steve McQueen came into her life, and finally, they met, and the bells and banjos went off, and they fell in love. Well, Arnold Schulman took that script and adapted it for a TV series, showed it to Aaron Spelling and Danny Thomas, and cast me as that role of, that Natalie Wood was in.
Okay.
And Michael Considine, who's in The Big Fat Greek Wedding, played one of my brothers. And Danny Thomas played a Greek Orthodox priest. So we did film that, and it was aired on NBC, I think a couple times. Even Bill Bixby was in the movie, was in that special with me, and then the networks decided that the Greek family ethnicity was a little too much for American entertainment at the time, so they decided not to go with it as a series.
Other progress we've made since then. So
that's true. It's so true. Oh my gosh, All in the Family.
Yeah. All right. Well, you also did modeling, wrote magazine columns in addition to everything else. I mean, it makes me tired just thinking about all this stuff that you've done.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. I used to write a column named Let's Talk It Over. And it was in some of these teenage, movie magazines. And recently, with Skype, I really enjoy that technology and love the idea of the virtual one-on-one exchanges. So I've decided to reinstate my column, but on Skype. And so actually, just before the 4th of July, I did a very, very quiet launch on my website. And if anyone cares to go on DonnaLoren.net, they can see on my front page how to participate. And if you'd like to have a Skype session with me, we can talk over whatever's on your mind.
All right. And I knew you were doing some online stuff, and I was gonna get to that in just a minute. Your recording career continues. You're with the Reprise label, and then you decide that you've had enough of the showbiz madness, and you trade that for a whole nother kind of madness and decide to start a family.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was 21 years old. I'd been singing since I was 5, and there were some problems, between my parents and I, and when I fell in love and decided to get married, I was still working for Dr. Pepper and traveling with my dad, who was my manager and my photographer. And then something else happened. My new mother-in-law passed away, and I became pregnant, and I thought, this is just time for me to be a stay-at-home mom. And even though my dad, proposed that I work part-time and be a part-time mom, it wasn't necessary for me to do that. So I opted to, raise my kids myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing leads to another, as they say. And you must have missed a recording because you started back up in the 80s.
I did. I mean, I did it as a therapy, honestly. As I told you before, I was in the midst of a divorce, and I just thought, this is the best way for me to express myself, and I was able to do it. So that's what I did. I never thought any much would come from it, but one thing was released on Reprise. No, actually, it was released on Warner Brothers because I was associated with Warner Brothers all those years, and got a little bit of interest, but I didn't really want to go on the road and leave my home, and so I just decided I had a young child still in my life, and actually 2 young children. So I wanted to still be a parent, and you really, at least back in those days, you had to go on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And, just as an example for your listeners and yourself, one of my kids is a musician, and he's actually been with the same mate for many, many years, and decided, okay, well, they're going to have their first child. Well, he's a musician traveling constantly. He's on the road right now. It's maybe it's easier for the dad to leave home, but I just couldn't imagine for the mother to be gone.
Yeah.
Couldn't.
Well, and it would be a different story for a lot of kids if their mothers felt the same way. Whether it's going out on the road entertaining or whatever it is, just leaving the kids.
Yeah, it had to be the right situation, and I just made my decision, and, for better or for worse, what can I say? Just what happened to me.
Yeah. Well, you've, let's see, we mentioned the modeling and your design and fashion business that you've got going. You're writing songs, still performing and recording. You got your own label, though, now, I understand.
Yeah. What we did was we just put out a CD called Love It Away with songs that I was writing. And, I moved to Hawaii about 18 years ago and settled down with my husband, Jared, and started a fashion business because, I'd been making most of my entertainment clothes, most of the clothes that I wore when I performed during my career. And when I moved to Hawaii, I had to get used to the humidity and the 88 degrees all the time, so I didn't have a wardrobe, and I really wasn't into just collecting the standard muumuus.
Uh-huh.
So I went back to my designing, and it ended up being a business, but that lasted for 10 years, and while that was culminating, after many years, I just started writing some songs, and met a great fellow in Los Angeles who had a studio, met another fella in Hawaii who had a studio, and actually that's where my Skyping skills started, because when I was in Hawaii, I would Skype with the engineer in L.A., and vice versa. When I was in L.A., I would Skype with my engineer in Hawaii, and that's how that album came about.
Okay. Yeah, Skype technology is a wonderful thing.
I love it. Love it. Yeah, I mean, it really works for me. It just shrinks the world, and, I'm thank goodness for email. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
And Skype, at least for now, I mean, you can actually connect with people, and it's free.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned your biography. You're still working on that then?
I completed my manuscript. I have a first draft, and right now I have some people reading it to see where we're going to go with it. And I'll let you know.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you were still working on it or what. So,
it's a process, as you can well imagine. Just putting your story down on paper is a process. And then you obviously either need to publish it yourself or find a publisher, and during that process you find an editor. And it's just a very long process to, because it's your life.
Yeah. Now, we were talking about technology. You also perform online. How does that work?
Yeah, there's something called, wait a minute, what's it called? Stage It. It's called Stage It.
Okay.
And, I did actually, I haven't done one in a while, but I did 3 concerts online, and lots of people are picking up on it. Lots of people are doing concerts. They're doing multiple, artist concerts. So, check it out. But actually, I was producing my own little show in my living room, and would hire a crew and for video, for sound. It was kind of a big production. So I did it 3 times, and now I'm taking a break and just seeing how, what else is going on in my life.
Do you have a full band behind you and everything, or?
I have a pianist because I have a grand piano in my living room, and we made it very intimate.
Okay. I think I interrupted you on your other deal where I said we would get to it in a minute. Something new in the works, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's called Let's Talk It Over. And basically, the birth of that came from a column that I used to write in magazines. But now what I'm doing is offering sessions for anyone who feels like either, asking me questions that refer to the past or what's going on now, or even, if they relate in any way. For instance, if someone's trying to start a career, or if they're involved in something, even in a very local way, but they need some coaching, learning how to do their lines, or anything they have in mind, even questions about philosophy, how do you live your life, and diet, for that matter, just to try to live a well-balanced life. And so here I've lived for 66 years, and I'm ready to share my life's experience.
Well, now, any of this can be gotten from your website.
That's right.
All right. And that, again, is?
DonnaLoren.net.
All right.
You can join me on Facebook and Twitter, and, and we'll just all stay in touch.
All right. Donna Loren, Donna, LOREN.net.
That's right.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to whatever you're putting out there then.
Thank you, Tim.
And
well, this is a crazy and wonderful time in all of our lives on this planet, and I just support and encourage everyone to dig down and find all the courage that we can muster up to keep this planet of ours spinning in the way that we want it to.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. This has been probably the longest interview that I've done. We're coming up on an hour now, and most.
Well, it flies.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad it hadn't seemed like an hour to you, but
not at all. Time is irrelevant.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you spending your time with me.
Thank you, Tim, so much for seeking me out, and have a great life in Alabama, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks a lot.